She never served a single day. She's lying. My brother shouted across the packed courtroom, pointing an accusing finger right at me. He was suing me, claiming I had manipulated our late father and stolen his entire trust fund by pretending to be a combat veteran. The entire gallery gasped. My brother smiled triumphantly, convinced he had just ruined my life in front of everyone. But then, my attorney calmly stood up, walked to the bench, and handed the judge a sealed, classified envelope bearing a seal from the Department of Defense. The judge broke the red wax seal, read the contents, and slowly removed his glasses. His face turned ghost white. He slammed his gavel down and commanded, "All rise." I'm Evelyn Vance, and at 42 years old I learned that the people who share your blood can sometimes be your coldest enemies. To understand how I ended up sitting in a cold courtroom facing my own brother, you have to go back to how we were raised. Julian was 3 years younger than me, but he lived his entire adult life with a sense of untouchable entitlement. While I left home at 27 to enter military service, Julian stayed behind, living off our father Thomas's generosity. My father was a self-made man who built a successful logistics firm, accumulating a life's worth of real estate and investments. But Julian treated our father like a personal bank, constantly starting vague business ventures that always failed, only to run back to Dad for another financial rescue. When Dad's health began to rapidly decline last year, I took an extended leave to sit by his bedside during those final, painful weeks. Julian barely visited, usually dropping in only to hint about updating the family estate plans. On Dad's final night, when it was just the two of us in the quiet hospital room, he pulled me close. His hand was trembling, but his eyes were sharper than I had seen them in months. "Evelyn," he whispered, his voice barely above a rasp. "Julian thinks money is a right, not a responsibility. He doesn't know what real sacrifice looks like. But you do. I've structured the trust fund so that it protects you, but your brother will be furious when he finds out the condition I attached." 3 days after the funeral, the family lawyer read the will. Dad had left the vast majority of his $5 million estate in a trust that required the primary beneficiary to have verified, honorable military service. Julian was completely cut off from controlling the core assets, receiving only a modest monthly stipend. When the lawyer finished reading, Julian turned to me, his jaw clenched and his eyes burning with pure hatred. "You set this up," he hissed. "You've been playing a long game, Evelyn, but I'm going to prove you're a fake." What followed was a ruthless campaign designed to destroy my reputation before we ever stepped foot inside a courtroom. Julian hired a high-powered, publicity-hungry attorney and launched a whisper campaign among our extended family, old family friends, and even local business circles. He began spreading rumors that my 15 years away from home were an elaborate cover-up. Because my specific unit operated under strict classified protocols, there was virtually no public digital footprint of my service online. Julian weaponized that silence. He told anyone who would listen that I had actually been spending those years bouncing between low-level jobs, hiding from debts, or even serving time in an out-of-state prison. Every family dinner turned into an interrogation. Cousins I hadn't spoken to in years began texting me, asking subtle, invasive questions about my rank, my discharge papers, and why I never posted photos in uniform on social media. When I refused to answer due to the binding military non-disclosure agreements I had signed, my silence was taken as proof of guilt. Julian even managed to leak a story to a local news blog, claiming that a wealthy local veteran's estate was being hijacked by an imposter daughter. I received anonymous calls telling me I was a disgrace to actual veterans. Through it all, the pain was suffocating. I had spent 15 years of my life away from comfort, making sacrifices that cost me sleep, relationships, and my own peace of mind, all to serve my country in the shadows. Now, my own brother was painting me as a fraud to line his own pockets. But I couldn't break my oath to defend myself in public gossip. I had to endure the shame, stay completely silent, and wait for the legal battle where the real truth would finally be forced into the light. 2 months after Dad's passing, the official legal summons arrived. Julian had formally filed a lawsuit to invalidate the trust, accusing me of fraud, undue influence, and misrepresentation. The court date was set, and the pressure was rising. I knew that without official government validation, the judge would have no choice but to freeze the estate or rule in Julian's favor. While my brother was busy celebrating his pending legal victory with his legal team, I spent my afternoons packing up our childhood home. It was an overwhelming process, sifting through decades of memories, old family albums, and Dad's personal belongings. On a quiet Tuesday evening, I was clearing out the back of Dad's primary closet in his master suite when I noticed a loose floorboard hidden under a heavy wooden shoe rack. I pried the board up, revealing a small, dusty steel safe that I had never seen before. Taped to the top of the safe was a small key, along with a handwritten note in my father's distinct script, for Evelyn. Only open when the storm arrives. My hands trembled as I unlocked the safe. Inside, wrapped in velvet, was an official, heavy brass cylinder sealed with lead, accompanied by a sheaf of official government documents. My father had kept meticulous records of his private correspondence with my former commanding officer, along with an official letter sent directly from a high-ranking Department of Defense official. As it turned out, my father had known about the classified nature of my service all along. He had secretly petitioned the military to establish a legal verification mechanism in the event his estate was ever challenged. Deep within the safe was a sealed, wax-stamped envelope from the Pentagon marked for judicial eyes only. My father had built a fortress to protect me, leaving behind the exact weapon I needed to tear Julian's lies to pieces in front of the entire court. The morning of the hearing arrived, heavy and suffocating. The courtroom was packed with distant relatives, family acquaintances, and even a few reporters who had been tipped off by Julian's aggressive public relations lawyer. Julian sat at the plaintiff's table wearing a tailored charcoal suit, looking completely relaxed and smug. He repeatedly glanced over at me, smirking as if he had already claimed Dad's millions and driven me out of the family for good. When the proceedings began, Julian's lawyer stood up with theatrical flair. He presented a series of fabricated timeline records, state tax documents, and public registry searches, all showing that my name had no public connection to any active military branch during my 15 years away. He paced in front of the bench, raising his voice so the entire gallery could hear every venomous word. "Your Honor," he declared passionately, "what we have here is a tragic case of sibling manipulation. Evelyn Vance built a complete fantasy world to convince a dying, vulnerable father that she was serving her country, all to hijack a $5 million trust fund away from her rightful brother." Julian took the stand shortly after, delivering a performance worthy of an Oscar. With rehearsed tears in his eyes, he testified about how heartbroken he was to discover his sister's unforgivable deception. The gallery whispered loudly, with several family members glaring at me in disgust. My own attorney sat silently beside me, resting his hand over the briefcase containing the sealed Pentagon file. Julian's team thought they had walked me right into a perfect trap, unaware that every arrogant step they took was bringing them closer to total destruction. When Julian's lawyer finally sat down, convinced victory was theirs, my attorney stood up with total composure. He didn't offer a long speech. Instead, he walked directly to the bench, holding the wax-sealed envelope bearing the official seal from the Department of Defense. "Your Honor," he said, "before we proceed any further, the defense submits classified evidentiary filing 8A, delivered under federal directive for judicial review only." Julian's lawyer jumped up to object, calling it a cheap stalling tactic, but the judge overruled him and accepted the envelope. The room fell into absolute silence. The judge picked up a letter opener, broke the red wax seal, and pulled out the redacted dossier along with a personal letter signed by a 3-star general. As his eyes moved across the official combat record, detailing my 15 years in covert logistics and redacted special operations support, his expression transformed from mild interest to utter shock. He read about the sacrifices, the confidential medals awarded in secret, and the explicit confirmation that my service was classified under national security protocols. The judge slowly removed his glasses, his face turning ghost white as he looked up from the papers. He looked directly at Julian and his attorney with cold disgust, slammed his gavel down, and commanded in a booming voice, "All rise." The entire courtroom scrambled to their feet. The judge turned to face me, stood at attention, and offered a crisp, formal salute. "Major Vance," he said, his voice echoing through the quiet gallery, "this court owes you a profound apology, and this country owes you an eternal debt of gratitude." Julian gasped, stumbling backward against his chair, his face drained of all color as the entire courtroom realized the massive mistake they had just made. The judge turned his attention back to Julian, his expression severe. "Mr. Vance, this lawsuit is dismissed with prejudice. Furthermore, due to the fraudulent claims and malicious intent demonstrated today, I am referring your actions to the district attorney for civil fraud and ordering you to cover every penny of your sister's legal fees." Julian sank into his chair, completely crushed under the weight of his own arrogance. His high-priced lawyer was already packing his briefcase, refusing to even look at him. After the hearing, extended family members approached me with stammering apologies, but I walked past them without a word. Their loyalty had been as cheap as Julian's promises. Using the $5 million inheritance my father had protected for me, I established the Thomas and Evelyn Vance Foundation, dedicated to helping retired female veterans transition into civilian life and secure legal aid. Standing on the cliffs of Carmel, watching the sunset over the ocean, I finally felt at peace. I had honored my father's legacy, defended my own honor, and built a future on my own terms. Now, I'm curious about you watching my story today. What would you have done if you were standing in my shoes, facing a betrayal like this? Drop a comment below and let me know the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. Don't forget to check out the next story on your screen right now. It's another incredible journey that will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching.